just remember that there are, first of all, several different parts of the vertebral column. So let's go through what those are. What are the vertebrae in the neck region called? Cervical vertebrae, right. So neck region is cervical vertebrae. What about the ones that support the ribs? What are they called? Thoracic, right? So this is the type of thing you should know. Behind the ribs, what do you have? Lumbar, right. So you have cervical, thoracic, lumbar. How about between the hips? Sacral, very good. And then finally, caudal, right. So the tail region is the caudal vertebrae. The sacral vertebrae are fused together. There's about 3 of them in the cat. The first 2 cervical vertebrae have special names. So what's the first one called? The one that supports the head. Atlas, right. So you need a way to remember that. Greek mythology, Atlas was the creature that held up the world. Titan, yeah. And then the one behind the Atlas is called what? Axis. The axis, yeah. Then we have the parts of the hip. So there's 3 parts of the hip. What's the upper part of the hip? The anterior part. Ilium, right. So there's another part with the name ilium, which is in the intestine. So the spelled differently, yeah. So this ilium is I-L-I-U-M. The one in the intestine is I-L-E-U-M. So we have ilium. What's the forward projecting part of the posterior hip? The forward projecting part. Anyone know? Pubis. The ischium is the posterior part. So you can look at your own cat in front of you to see that. So the pubis is the posterior part that projects towards the front. The ischium is the part that projects toward the back. The hole in between is called the obturator foramen. Each side of the hips, each half of the hips has a name. Anyone know that name? So the half of the hip. The innominate bone. Okay, so together it forms the pelvic girdle, and each side is called the innominate bone. Yes?
So it forms the pelvic girdle?
Yeah, the pelvic girdle is the both sides together. Yeah, but each side is called the innominate bone, and it consists of the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. Okay, then we have the front part. What's the anterior part called? What girdle is that? So like in the shark, pectoral girdle, right. So we have the pectoral girdle, and this large bone is the scapula, right. So we've got the scapula with the spine here, and the supraspinous and the infraspinous fossae. And then we have the limb bones. Okay, so real quick, anterior limb bones. What's the upper one called? Humerus, right. What's the posterior upper part? Femur, right. So we got humerus, we got femur. How about this one with the elbow? Ulna. The other one is the radius, you got it. And in the back, the really thin bone in the back leg is called fibula. It's the fibula, yeah. The really thin one is the fibula. The thicker one is the tibia, yeah. Anyone know the name for the heel? I think we went over it in class. Yeah, it has kind of a C. Calcaneus, yes. So the heel bone is the calcaneus. So on the front limb you have basically carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. Back limb you have tarsals, metatarsals, phalanges. So phalanges are the same on both front and back limbs. But front limbs are called carpals, back limbs are called tarsals. Okay, oh, we missed one. How about the kneecap? What's the patella? Yeah. For the head, what did we talk about? Let's see. What's the lower jaw? Anyone remember that? Mandible, yeah. So the mandible would be the name for the lower jaw, which is missing in this particular cat. Did we go over the skull bones in detail? Okay, yes. So there's, so the very frontmost one, you can look at your cat skeleton. You have paired frontal bones here. So these are frontals right in the front. Then you have paired parietals and a single occipital at the back. So just like in the diagram in your handout. So the frontals are between the orbits, and then you have parietals behind those. Cheekbones, what are they called? The cheek, zygomatic arch, right? So that consists of several different bones. But as long as you know that's the zygomatic arch, that's enough. So you have, yeah, it's the squamosal and the malar, but you don't need to worry about that. Nasals are the two bones forming the upper part of the nose. Premaxillaries are right underneath the nostrils.
The incisors are attached to them?
Yeah, incisors are attached to the premaxillaries. Canines are attached to the maxillary, which is right next to that. Yeah, and there's postorbital processes, which sort of come down right behind the orbit. And then the side view, you see the temporal bone, which is kind of right underneath the parietal. It's not labeled on page 159 in the top diagram, but it's the one right under the parietal. So right above the zygomatic arch, kind of in the back. So on the side, right about here, this is the temporal bone. Oh, we missed the rib cage. So for the ribs, what are the three types of ribs? Floating, right? So we've got floating ribs. What else do we have? True ribs and false ribs. Do you remember how to tell the difference?
True ribs are attached to, false ribs are all attached to one part that's attached to the rib cage, but true ribs, like each have their own connection.
Yeah, exactly. So floating ribs are attached to nothing. They just float. True ribs are attached directly to the sternum by cartilages. False ribs are attached to cartilages that attach to the sternum as one piece. So the cartilage is attached to the cartilage of the last true rib for the false ribs. So these are the false ribs. This would be a floating rib, and these are all true ribs. How about the sternum? How about the front part of the sternum? What's that called?
Manubrium.
Manubrium. Then we have, what's after the manubrium? A couple of bones with the same name. Sternambrate. And then the last part is called the what? Xiphoid. Yeah, so the xiphoid process. There's a xiphoid cartilage on the back of the xiphoid process. And then the costal cartilages are these cartilages attached to the ribs. Okay, did we miss anything for the skeleton? I know there's a little more detail we went into when we actually did it in class. So you should study the smaller level parts. You know, when you come in on Friday, if you can, or if you can't, just study your handouts. But you know, you should study the smaller details too. So the processes, yeah. Marlon?
Do we need to know the sagittal crest and the
Yeah, you should know those. Yeah, there isn't really time to go over everything today. But you know, just make sure you study the diagrams, and if